Hi, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Helen. Today, I want us to look at something, the 10 plagues of Egypt, but not in a way that probably you've looked at it. I was also shocked as I was going through the 10 plagues once more. I thought the 10 plagues was God trying to deliver the children of Israel from the Egyptians. That was partially true, but I've come to realize that God was not just interested in delivering the children of Israel from Egypt. He was also interested in delivering the Egyptians from the slavery of their gods, of their idols, from the bondage of their idols. Because in Exodus chapter 12 verse 12, it says that on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. And also if you look at Numbers 33 verse 4, it says the Lord had brought judgment on their gods. Like the whole battle was against the gods of Egypt, not the Egyptians. It was to save the Egyptians from the false gods. And the first plague, or still on that topic, if you look at Pharaoh was a title. Like right now we have president. President is a title, but we have someone sitting in that particular post. So Pharaoh was a title, and being a Pharaoh, Pharaoh was a type of a god. And Pharaoh used to wear a crown with a serpent on it, drawing on it, or serpent symbol on that particular crown, because that was the symbol of that particular god. And if you look at the first plague, or not really the first plague, but the first disaster that, should I call it disaster? Miracle, yes. The first miracle that God did to Pharaoh was the rod. Moses threw his rod and it turned into a serpent. The magicians also threw their rods and their rods turned into serpent. And then Moses' rod swallowed this other, the rod of Moses that had turned into the snake, the serpent. It swallowed these other rods that had also turned into serpents. And you can imagine at the end of the day, these magicians didn't have their rods because Moses' rod swallowed their rods. And so this was the first fight against the god Pharaoh. I've said Pharaoh was a type of a god. And now, if you look at now the next plagues, from the first plague to the last plague, we'll look at them and see. So the first plague was water turned into, the river Nile turned into blood. If you remember well, there was a god called Hapi. Hapi, it was the god of the Nile. So Egyptians used to worship this god as the provider of life. We see this if you look at Exodus 7 verse 15. God is telling Moses, go to Pharaoh in the morning when he goes out to the water. This was probably the first thing Pharaoh was doing when he woke up. He would go and take a shower in the Nile in respect or in reverence to the god of the Nile, the provider of life. Probably thanking him because he's alive and all that. And we also He's also the, we also see when Pharaoh's daughter also went to the Nile. What was Pharaoh's daughter going to do in the Nile? We see that at the time when Pharaoh, when the daughter picked Moses from River Nile, they believed in River Nile as the source of life. And that's why we are seeing, they believed River Nile, they associated a god with it, the god Hapi, which was now the provider of life. And this is why God attacks River Nile, the source of life to them, what they believed was the source of life to them. And that water turns into blood. And the god Hapi could not restore that blood back to water. So that was trying to tell them that there is a God who is in charge of this water. There is a God who created River Nile, and it is not Hapi, the one you are worshipping, the god Hapi. The second plague was aimed at a frog goddess. As you remember, the second plague from Exodus, if you read Exodus 8, chapter 8, verse 1 to 15, you'll find that there were frogs everywhere. In fact, the River Nile produced frogs. Instead of producing life, now it produced frogs which were everywhere. And there was a goddess, a frog goddess. So that was a fight against that god. The third plague was aimed at a god called Geb. Geb, it was the god of the earth. And the third plague was lice. I won't dwell much on it, but you can do much study on that god. And then we have a god, I don't know how to even read it, god Uashit. It was called the fly god. And on attacking this god, God actually sent lice. Not flies. God sent flies to fight the fly god of the swamps. And the fifth plague was aimed toward Heather. It was the goddess of love, the Egyptian goddess of love and protection. And its symbol was a symbol of a cow. And as you can see, the fifth plague was the livestock. The Egyptians' livestock were dying. So this was an attack. And this goddess, the Heather god, could not revive or even stop the animals from dying. Then the sixth plague was boils on the Egyptians. So they had a goddess called Isis, which was the goddess of medicine, magic, and wisdom. It meant this goddess could provide healing if you had probably such diseases like boils. But this goddess could not restore the Egyptians when they had these boils. Moses had to entreat God, the God of heaven, to actually take these boils away. The seventh plague was the hailstones. The Egyptians had a goddess called Nut. He was believed to be in charge of the sky and the heavens and everything that, and he was controlling everything that was happening in the sky. So when hailstone came or was coming, and this goddess Nut could not control or could not stop the hails, then they perhaps realized that this goddess was false god. He was not in charge of the sky after all. Then we have another goddess, another god. The eighth plague was the plague of locusts. So the locusts ate the vegetation of the Egyptians, and they had a god called Seth, which was the god of the storm, war, and disorder. He was referred to as agriculture deity. It means if there was a problem with their vegetation, then this particular god called Seth could intervene. But when the locusts came and destroyed all the vegetation, this god failed to intervene. The god called Seth. And the ninth plague, there was a god in Egypt. One of the Egyptian gods was Ra, the sun god. This sun god was giving light, or responsible for giving light. That is what they believed. But remember, the ninth plague is that thick darkness covered the entire land of Egypt. A darkness that you could feel. I don't know how thick that darkness was, but it was a darkness that you could actually feel. And so the sun god could not provide light during this time of darkness. And so even this goddess, this god failed. And then the last plague was death of firstborn sons. Probably we'll discuss further on that some other time, which god was responsible. But this actually tells us that the 10 plagues was not against the Egyptians, but it was against the gods, the false gods of the Egyptians, to tell the Egyptians that there is a God up in heaven who is able, and they should not believe in the false god. So it was to deliver the Egyptians from their bondage, their goddess bondage or something, and also to deliver the children of Israel from the work bondage that they were in. So through this, I came to learn that sometimes God usually comes to our lives to fight conflicting gods in our lives. If you are God, the small g, if you are God, is probably your work. God will temporarily take away that so that you can refocus on Him before He can give you that job. He needs to be your number one, not your number two. He is the only God, and He doesn't share His glory with anyone. But most of the time when probably we lose our jobs, we tend to run helter-skelter trying to find or trying to wonder what happened, or trying to, the focus at this point in time should be on God the Creator. Restore the relationship you had with God, so that when God restores you, when God gives you back your job and a better job, He is not number two in your life, but He is number one. Unfortunately, sometimes God allows our own dear ones, our own kids, the ones probably who we consider as our gods. Like, you love your child more than you love God. And when that happens, God may attack your God. So when we face different calamities or such calamities, the focus should be back to God the Creator, because He's just getting our attention. I'm not saying that if your child dies, that means you are worshiping that child. No. But sometimes we should not stop worshiping God because of such calamities. My child now is sick. Me, I'll only go to church when this child is well. What does that statement mean? That statement means that is your first God and God comes second. Like, regardless, God should be first. Whether or not your child is sick, whether or not your life is well, whether or not, God should be the first. He should be your first priority. So that, yes, you may experience challenges just like Job, but let not your challenges be God fighting the gods, the small gods in your life. Let your challenges come from probably just strengthening your faith, God sending them to just strengthen your faith, but not to fight the gods in your life. That may be more painful, or it may appear really, it may not come really well. It may not really be easy on you. So it's just something that I learned, that when things get really tough, focus should be, who is my God? Will I lose focus on my God? Will I stop worshiping this true God and focus on the false gods? God is able to provide with or without that particular job, with or without that particular child, with or without that particular husband. So the focus should be God, and these other things should come after God. Nothing should replace God in his position in your life. So I hope you've also learned. You can share also in the comment section probably what you learned, so that we grow together.